everybody, Nick Congatis for Nick's America, and I am back again to talk about what else right now, besides, your fill of Ukraine and Russia. The other big story that the media, the mainstream establishment, corporate, whatever you want to call them, aren't talking about, Canada, and how Justin Trudeau is a tyrant, and there's no question about that now. He is a tyrant. When you have something like the headline we see here, there's very little room to call him anything else. These people are peaceful protesting, unlike Black Lives Matter and Antifa, who did none of the sort during the summer of Floyd in 2020. What was it? $2 billion, over $2 billion worth of damage throughout the United States during the summer of love, the BLM protests. You had the NBA, you had every sports league, you had every corporate entity bending the knee. You had Nancy Pelosi and her fellow white Congress people dressed up in African garb to bend the knee and everything. And listen, it's a mob mentality, because what have we seen, especially lately, from organizations like the Marxist Black Lives Matter organization? Banks are disassociating themselves with Black Lives Matter. Local chapters in liberal areas, local chapters of Black Lives Matter are threatening lawsuits against the parent organization, because none of that money, the tens of millions of dollars that they've raised, have actually gone to the local chapters. Meanwhile, the former co-founders of the BLM movement, as what we know as the modern Black Lives Matter movement. When I say modern, I mean in the last 2-3 years. We see them buying up mansions, and they always want to talk about, we want to put this money back into black businesses and black areas and everything. Meanwhile, they're buying mansions in predominantly white neighborhoods. So Trudeau really doesn't have much of a leg to stand on when it comes to talking about what constitutes a peaceful protest and what doesn't. Like we see with this Daily Mail headline from Monday. Outrage as Canadian single mom on minimum wage has bank account frozen for donating $50 to Freedom Convoy. Trudeau is blasted for draconian law that would never have been imposed on BLM. Now, to that point, we have right here in June of 2020. You see this right here, June 6th of 2020. Here's the picture. There he is, bending the knee for Black Lives Matter. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took a knee during a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Ottawa, ironically. Trudeau's act of solidarity comes after he declined to comment earlier in the day about whether he would be attending the protest. Well, obviously we see right here he did, and he bent the knee. He looks very sorrowful and mournful. I don't know, maybe over George Floyd, so you got to feel that way sometimes about fentanyl overdosers. But then, that was June 2020. Then we fast forward to within the last month, and he came out and he said, if you can see this here, let me try and zoom in. I have attended protests and rallies in the past when I agreed with the goals, when I supported the people expressing their concerns and their issues. Black Lives Matter is an excellent example of that. But I have also chosen not to go anywhere near protests that have expressed hateful rhetoric, violence towards fellow citizens, and a disrespect not just of science, but of the frontline health workers, and quite frankly, the 90% of truckers who have been doing the right thing to keep Canadians safe to put food on our tables. I've said this in previous videos. I want somebody to show me one time. I'd love to see any evidence of this. I have yet to have anybody confront me with it, of Justin Trudeau talking to anybody within this Freedom Convoy protest. He hasn't. He's not going to. It's about the narrative. It's about the agenda. It's not about dialogue. It's only about dialogue with radical extremists like those that are behind Black Lives Matter. And when I say radical extremists, I don't just mean violence. I mean their rhetoric and what they're saying. It's very far left. As we know, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, once famously said, I believe in 2015, she said, "We are trained Marxists." Okay, so they are very, and as I believe she put it, well-versed in activism and protest and stuff like that. But then you have somebody like Justin Trudeau who comes out and he'll say Black Lives Matter is an excellent example of people expressing their concerns and their issues. Now, I don't know whether he's talking about the burning buildings or the people being shot or the violence against those that might just simply be in the area while they're doing their protesting. You know, it's hard to say when you're in Justin Trudeau's shoes what exactly he means is an excellent example. What's the excellent example? Over $2 billion worth of damage? And then he'll say he's chosen not to go anywhere near protests that have expressed hateful rhetoric, violence towards fellow citizens, and a disrespect, COVID bullshit. Where's the hateful rhetoric? Where's the violence towards fellow citizens? I have yet to see somebody show me a video of one of these Freedom Convoy protesters being violent against anyone. And they might very well exist, but I haven't seen it yet. Have you? Let me know. Comment below. I want to know if you guys are experiencing the same thing I am in terms of the lack of any kind of evidence that would constitute hateful rhetoric and violence towards citizens. As we saw, the elderly woman on the scooter who was trampled by police horses, 10 seconds before that, she was calling out loudly for peace. Maybe that's hateful rhetoric to people like Justin Trudeau. Who can tell? Especially when you have such a busy schedule of applying black shoe polish to your face and other extremities. Black Lives Matter is an excellent example. They are an excellent example of how not to protest. And we were told by the media for months that these are mostly peaceful protests while they're standing in front of burning buildings. Excuse me. While they're lighting government buildings on fire, whether they're local or federal courthouses, they're attacking police stations. Why isn't that insurrection? They never define these things. And that's to keep you confused and to keep you in a state of fear or panic. And now we have Justin Trudeau, as we saw from the other article, he's freezing people's bank accounts. And look at this, single mom on minimum wage. She felt strongly enough to donate $50 to the Freedom Convoy, even though she might not have necessarily had that kind of disposable income. She felt strongly enough to give $50, which is a nice donation. It's not a major donation, but it's a nice donation, especially for someone who is allegedly in the situation that this woman is, being a single mom and working on minimum wage. And you're going to freeze that person's account? Well, what about, I thought you were about, keeping Canadians safe and putting food on the table. How does freezing a single mother making minimum wage, how does freezing her bank account put food on the table for her child? simply because she espoused a different political stance than the authoritarian tyrant dictator Justin Trudeau. And I don't have a problem saying that. Justin Trudeau is evil. He's a bad person. And, you know, you should say, well, you know, some people might say, well, you know, you shouldn't go that far in terms of, you know, demonizing or you know, taking away someone's humanity. Well, how about the prime minister of the country that you live in freezing your bank account when you make minimum wage simply for having a different political opinion than that of the people in charge? I'm sorry. That's wrong. There's no other way to slice it. There just isn't. So, I want you guys to comment, and I want you to tell me where this evidence is that the Freedom Convoy has had hateful rhetoric and violence towards other citizens. And I want someone to, I literally want somebody to show me some kind of evidence to back that up, to back those claims up. I haven't seen it yet. Just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. At the same time, you also have to think in terms of the way people like Trudeau go about things. If they had footage of the people, protesters within the Freedom Convoy being violent, you don't think they would have used that by now? You don't think it would be plastered everywhere? No, they had probably some dude that works for them standing in a field alongside a highway holding a 1930s/40s era German flag, if you catch my drift. The fact that somebody had a Confederate flag, first of all, it doesn't even make sense. Okay, and this was weeks ago now that we're talking about this. Okay, I don't understand what a Confederate flag has to do with anything. And I don't know if that is their way of discouraging Americans from following suit and having their own Freedom Convoy. From what I hear, there's already rumblings that it's going on right now. And you see that with the U.S. Capitol Police and other security officials within Washington, D.C., putting that fencing back up around the Capitol building ahead of Joe Biden's State of the Union address on March 1st, and in case this Freedom Convoy shows up in D.C. around the same time. But I thought walls and fences didn't work. They sure like to have them around their own properties and around the people's houses, which is the Capitol building and the White House. Now, I'm not saying that those facilities shouldn't have a heightened level of security. I mean, they are housing some of the most powerful and important people on earth. You would expect that. At the same time, they don't always have those up. They just have those up when people who espouse different political beliefs and people who are simply protesting, peacefully, mind you, for their freedom, they want to keep those people away. Because they want to maintain some kind of semblance of we're in charge, you speak out, and we're coming after your livelihood. Look at what they're doing in Canada. Look at what Trudeau is doing. And the communist Canadian Parliament. Now, granted, there were 150 some, I believe 151 who voted against extending Trudeau's enactment of the Emergencies Act, but there was 185 that voted for it. Which means the Emergencies Act, which was supposed to be, according to Trudeau, time limited, now is extended another 30 days, even though they also come out and say, well, just because the blockade has dispersed doesn't mean we're not still under emergency. That's their argument. And I've said it in terms of COVID. You give these people power, good luck getting it back or getting them to willingly give it up. Once they grab any kind of power, they're not going to give it up. So, like I said, I want you guys to comment. Let me know what you think. Give me some kind of evidence for the things that I simply haven't seen, because I'd like to see it if there is some kind of evidence. I'm an evidence-based person. If it exists, then yeah, I'll admit it and I'll talk about it. But let's just say there is. Let's say there's one video of a Freedom Convoy protester being violent or spewing hateful rhetoric. First of all, they would have used it already. Second of all, that pales in comparison, and I'm not justifying it, I'm not condoning it. At the same time, that pales in comparison to the at least a couple of months of rioting following the death of George Floyd. So I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. You guys see all the links. There'll be also hyperlinked versions of that in the description, so you guys can check out, follow, like, subscribe, do all the good stuff there. If you like our work, please don't hesitate to go to nixamerica.com. Show us all the love you can, and I'll see you on the next one.